While you and I were sleeping, US President Donald Trump announced that South Africa would not be invited to next year's G20 summit.
Trump said the US is stopping payments to South Africa and they are banned from the G20.
His reasoning? Because they refuse to acknowledge his bullshit narrative of a white South African genocide.
Trump and his government are not performing well right now in America. Even his own people, they're protesting him. So what does he do? He uses distractions every time. His latest distraction right now is South Africa. He keeps talking about stuff that has been proven not to be true. Like he's saying white South African farmers, they're being killed in South Africa and their lands are being taken away. Well, now he's going on social media and he's saying that South Africa, they're not invited in the next G20 summit that is happening in America, in Miami. Can you believe this?
While you and I were sleeping, US President Donald Trump announced that South Africa would not be invited to next year's G20 summit that he'll be hosting in Miami. We had a very successful G20 summit this weekend, and the presidency refused to hand over the G20 leadership to a junior diplomat. Instead, the handover took place at the DIRCO offices on Monday. The presidency responded not so long after that, saying, among other things, that South Africa will continue to actively and fully participate as a member of the G20, and how it's regrettable that despite numerous attempts by South Africa to reset relations with the United States has just applied these punitive measures based on nothing but misinformation. And in case you're wondering, no, Trump does not have the power to do that, because the G20 operates on consensus, and it doesn't have a constitution that would empower him to not invite a G20 member. I mean, the announcement by Trump itself is already setting a bad precedent, because when the G20 was first formed, or when the first summit was held in 2008, nobody would have imagined that events in the geopolitical arena would play out in the way that they have, and warrant a G20 member opting not to invite another member because heads of state have diplomatic decorum. But now we've got Donald Trump in the White House, and this is everyone's reality. So what do you guys think about this? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to drop me a follow if you can.
Trump said the US is stopping payments to South Africa and they are banned from the G20. My brothers, this is why Africa must unite, because it's clear the way you're dressed, that is how you'll be addressed. If we put our resources together, who will need the West? We will form G-Africa and tell Miami to keep their party.
Donald Trump has just announced that South Africa will not be allowed to attend the 2026 G20 summit in Miami, and he is stopping all payments and subsidies to the country. His reasoning? Because they refuse to acknowledge his bullshit narrative of a white South African genocide. Now, I know this has been debunked a million times, but let's do it again. Now, South Africa does have a really high murder rate with 27,000 murders annually, and that's a number from 2023 to 2024. However, less than 1% of those murders are these white farmers that he says are being genocided. And if we do some quick math with a very generous 1% of 27,000, that's 270 murders, which is bad. Any murder is bad. I think we can just say that, right? All murder is bad. But is it a genocide? No. Of course not. Meanwhile, nearly 70,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since October 2023. And Trump refuses to acknowledge this as a genocide. So if you're keeping score, basically, brown people killed, no big deal. White people killed.
Trump and his government are not performing well right now in America. Even his own people, they're protesting him. So what does he do? He uses distractions every time. His latest distraction right now is South Africa. He keeps talking about stuff that has been proven not to be true. Like he's saying white South African farmers, they're being killed in South Africa and their lands are being taken away. Well, now he's going on social media and he's saying that South Africa, they're not invited in the next G20 summit that is happening in America, in Miami. Can you believe this? He went on social media and announced that. Imagine being the South African president and only finding this out on social media. That is not presidential at all. I wonder, does Trump even have the right to say who can and who cannot go to the G20 summit? The next G20 summit is happening in America in 2026 in Miami. So I'm guessing what Trump is going to do is going to refuse the South African president entry into America. South Africa is fighting back, and that is why Trump is very furious. He does not like someone fighting back, just like a bully. Bullies, they hate someone fighting back, and that's exactly what Trump is. Trump was supposed to be the next president of the G20, but he refused. Instead, he said that he's going to put someone from his embassy, which is just crazy. That is disrespect. So South Africa, they're saying they're not going to allow it, and that is why Trump is very furious. Just like a bully, Trump is not picking on countries the same size as America. He's picking on countries like South Africa, Venezuela, Iran. Imagine that. Why is he not picking fights with Russia or China? Or maybe I'm wrong. Is Trump actually the good guy? Is he the one who is protecting the white South African farmers while South Africa, they're actually the ones in the wrong?
Guys, you won't believe this. So yesterday, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, issued a statement, and in his write-up, he stated that South Africa will not be receiving an invitation to the 2026 G20, which will be hosted in the great city of Miami, Florida, and FC. South Africa has demonstrated to the world they are not a country worthy of membership anywhere. That is according to Donald Trump. And this morning, the president of South Africa, Ramaphosa, also responded by reminding the United States that South Africa is founding members of the G20. Yeah, and he stated that South Africa will continue to participate as a full, active, and constructive member of the G20. And one thing is clear here, the diplomatic tensions between South Africa and the United States is escalating very quickly. So the South African government must be careful. But again, I trust and believe in the government of South Africa, in the oneness of South Africans. So regardless of what happened, the South African government will stand out. What the United States do, if you are protecting their interests, the United States don't really give a fuck about your record. So the punishment that South Africa is receiving from the United States today is because of the fact that South Africa is a member of the BRICS organization. That organization is a threat to the US dollar influence globally. And this is why every country that is part of that organization, especially the 5 core members, the United States is doing everything possible to attack them one after the other. But it is what it is. This is diplomacy, and this is global politics for you. God bless the president of South Africa. God bless South Africans.
Breaking news, family. It looks like the diplomatic row between South Africa and the US is far from over. This is what President Trump is saying. At the conclusion of the G20, South Africa refused to hand over the G20 presidency to a senior representative from the US Embassy who attended the closing ceremony, Trump said in a post on Truth Social. Therefore, at my direction, South Africa will not be receiving an invitation to the 2026 G20, which will be hosted in the great city of Miami, Florida next year, close quote. Now here is the twist. Head of Diplomacy, Gleison Manyathela says, South Africa is the founding member of the G20. We don't get invited to G20 meetings and leaders summit. Those are gatherings of members. If other members allow this, then the G20 will die. South Africa is a G20 troika member, outgone, current, and incoming presidency. As this US-South Africa diplomatic spat continues, it will be interesting to see what other G20 members are going to say about this. And what do you guys think?
I guess South Africa's not welcome to Miami, or at least not to Trump's golf club, where he'll be hosting the G20 summit next year. See, Trump uninvited South Africa from the 2026 G20 because of their horrific human rights abuses based on the completely false far-right conspiracy theory known as the white genocide theory, which claims that white South Africans are being targeted in racial killings. Meanwhile, back in reality, Trump has been hosting and on his knees for the Saudi crown prince and the jihadist terrorist leader of Syria in the Oval Office this month. Make this make sense. Both Syria and Saudi Arabia are some of the worst places on the planet for human rights abuses. But I guess those human rights abuses aren't being perpetrated against people who look like Trump, so they don't matter to him. It's not even clear if he can legally forbid South Africa from attending next year's G20 because they're just as much a member of the G20 as the United States is. They're also likely to have strong backing from the other members of the G20, almost all of whom praise their handling of this year's summit.
So guys, Trump is throwing another tantrum again. He's saying next year at the G20 summit, South Africa won't be allowed at the G20. But he doesn't realize that you need all of the G20 members to agree to that. And what we saw at the last G20 is that everybody, as soon as Ramaphosa closed that G20 summit, all the presidents and delegates got up to shake his hand and say, yeah, boy, you stood on business. You think they're all going to say, nah, fam. They need to understand something. Nobody talks about a nobody. You get it? Trump isn't talking about San Marino, a country that people hardly know about. You know what I'm saying? So the reason why he keeps us in his mouth so much is because we're big G's, boy. Hey, Trump is just giving it away, man. Thanks for the hype, Trump. Thanks for the hype. You know, you're just reaffirming the fact that South is who they think they are. You're just reaffirming it, you know. The fact that you can't keep us out of your mouth, and the fact that we got other big countries who also are invested in what we're doing and who we are, just goes to show you something, that South Africa is big, guys. And the sooner us as South Africans realize that, the sooner we can unite and change that narrative. You know, Remember that half of all gold in the world has come from just the Witwatersrand. One of the biggest diamonds ever found, which was on the Queen's scepter or crown, came from the Kimberley Hole. And besides that, we still got minerals and resources. That's why Trump is big mad. Big mad. Trump, stop throwing your toys out the cart, brother. You're making yourself look bad. You know what they say? A wise man once said nothing. There's power in silence. But thanks for the hype, Trump. Thank you. Danko.